Star Wars, the second highest grossing movie franchise of all time, beloved by fans, despised by fans, one of the most creative and layered worlds in fiction, a political tragedy with laser guns and laser swords neatly wrapped up with fun characters and an interesting story. But I'm sure most of us can agree that the Skywalker saga is a bit of a mess. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. However, when I think about Star Wars, or at least the Core 9 movies, it's a lot better than when I'm watching it. Because in my mind, I see what's supposed to be going on, what George Lucas clearly intended for the franchise and what it was meant to be. But as we all know, George Lucas, while he's great at making these ideas, he's not great at executing them in a very satisfying way. When I'm watching the movies, that's all I see. I think the Skywalker Saga, episodes 1 through 9, are some of the best candidates for a remake. Now, of course, remakes are really hit or miss. Some are blatantly obvious cash grabs, lifeless, dull, etc. But some movies, like The Mummy or Ocean's 11, really breathed new life into the original IP and made it what it was always meant to be. Even Mission Impossible was originally a TV series from the 1960s before it was remade into another super successful movie franchise. So, with the right people and a good idea of what Star Wars was always meant to be, I think it could be the greatest remake success story ever. Let's start with my main issue about Star Wars. The thing is, I don't care. Take that exactly as I mean it. I don't care, not because I don't want to, but because I can't. The emotions are evidently supposed to be very high all the time, but to me at least, pretty much every emotional scene is sabotaged. In the sequels, sabotaged by a lack of consequences. Chewbacca explodes, he's fine. 3PO erases his memory, psych. Even though the scenes themselves were executed well, it shows that nothing really matters, and therefore I shouldn't care. In the originals, emotions are sabotaged, and I don't care because nor does anybody else. Remember when Alderaan, Princess Leia's home planet, exploded in front of her face, and she stood there like, oh no, don't do that. The most emotion anyone shows in the originals is Luke at the end of number 5 when Darth Vader infamously tells him that he did Luke's mom 20 odd years ago, even though when the father that's raised him since then dies, he has literally no reaction outside of, yeah, I get to join the wizard cult now. In the prequels, just like everything else, the emotional stakes are sabotaged by my next big issue, dialogue. Star Wars, for better or worse, has become infamous for its dialogue. It's charming in its own way, take it from somebody who has an I don't like sand t-shirt, but it causes some major plot holes, inconsistencies, and completely ruins some scenes. The dialogue in the prequels could very well be its own video if I dissected every scene, so I'll stick to 2 examples. 1. Padme's death could have really been something special. We're supposed to feel her sorrow, betrayal, and everything she loved work for be destroyed. But to me, at least, it falls very, very flat. Her dialogue before she's choked, saying that due to Anakin's homicidal rampage, she doesn't know him anymore. But the thing is, she absolutely does, and last time he killed a group of children, she was actually mildly aroused. So either she's racist or very inconsistent, neither trait fitting her character much at all. And then the droid after she's choked, like, yeah, I don't know, man, she's completely healthy. She's just gonna die, I don't know what to tell you. It feels strange, inconsistent, and underwhelming, especially considering what it could have been. We're supposed to feel everything she cares about disintegrate and lose the will to live with her, but the dialogue sabotaged the scene, making for an underwhelming and awkward character exit. My other example, the aforementioned first time Anakin kills a bunch of people and attacks the clones. We're supposed to see him the way Padme sees him. Well, maybe we're not supposed to be turned on like she is, which is an issue in itself, but we're supposed to see him struggling. He was ripped away from his mother, and next time he sees her, she dies in his arms. It's horrible. He's supposed to be tragic, tortured, and we're supposed to be sympathetic to what's going through his head. His first real slip, the moment we see what he could become. But every time I think about that gosh darn monologue, I start incessantly giggling, which is not at all the mood of the scene or what we're supposed to understand at all. As stated, the dialogue could be its own video entirely, especially considering Harrison Ford suggested tying George Lucas up and making him say his own lines at gunpoint. But I think that even just these 2 examples go to show how influential some small script tweaks could have drastically changed some scenes for the better. Now, make emotions feel real and fix dialogue are 2 of my 3 main general ideas for the saga as a whole. That's not to say it fixes everything. There's a lot more smaller and specific details at play. For example, this one might only work for the prequels, but my dad actually had the idea to switch up the order of events a little bit. This is all his idea, but I want to use it. He says that Phantom Menace is important because that's how we first see Anakin as a kind, confident little boy. But it could be shortened to about 30 minutes. 15 minutes of plot if we're actually going with this full idea and including about 15 minutes of pod racing. There you can see training montages, Annie and Padme growing up together, etc., taking about an hour. Then we spend the next hour movie in the first hour of what was originally Attack the Clones, up until he gets the bad dreams about his mom. Then with the time saved in 2, we can expand on the Clone Wars and not just confine it to a cartoon show. We can introduce Ahsoka Tano, why Anakin's so upset about not being Master in 3, etc. Makes Phantom Menace a prologue chapter as intended, adds to the awkward romance phase, expands the Clone Wars into a real war with actual stakes without it being homework in animation form. It can make all the tragedy in 3 a lot more impactful. Now, for another example, I already mentioned a few of my issues with the character of Padme Amidala, how her death felt lackluster, and she seemed pretty inconsistent across 2 and 3, but neither of those compare to my biggest issue with Padme, her relationship with Anakin Skywalker. They have a 5-year age gap, which is just fine, but at some point, somebody was 9 years old, which is exactly how old Anakin was in The Phantom Menace when they met when she was 14. This is very, very wrong. The crux of the prequel should not hinge on the fact that puberty hit Anakin like a truck at some point, and this absolutely needs to be fixed. Either way, A, make them both 11 or so and watch them grow up together, or B, an idea like slightly better, split Padme into 2 people. Either my version of it, the older warrior queen he grew up admiring, and her empathetic, soft-spoken daughter who's his age and future lover, or another one of my dad's ideas, 2 characters of the aforementioned personalities, but instead of mother-daughter, they're unrelated, the same age, both love interest Annie, and respective mothers to Luke and Leia, effectively making them half-siblings instead of twins. Originally, when my dad pitched this, I was confused to against this idea, namely because, didn't Ron Swanson say something about dividing your attention between 2 things? I was under the impression that Annie only broke the chastity bylaw because he was just so obsessed about Padme, one person, that he just couldn't help himself. How could he possibly manage to impregnate 2 women without A, the Jedi finding out, and B, fundamentally going against what I understood him to be as a character? But then I thought about it more and realized how genius this idea could be if we was just fleshed out a little more. Namely, why do the Jedi have a chastity law anyway? In my experience, religious organizations ban sex before marriage, sure, but actively encourage getting married and having kids who will likely grow up in the same religion. Are you seriously going to try and convince me that the literal chosen one walks in and they're like, yep, only one of you, just stay put? Because personally, if I was crazy enough to be on the Jedi Council, I'd want to squeeze as many midichlorians out of this guy as possible. He's just so spry and athletic and powerful. Who wouldn't want to marry him off to have babies? Oh, and if the way I'm talking about him sounds controlling, dehumanizing, and made you uncomfortable, I think I got my point across. So if we want to make Annie's turn a little more personal and or realistic, we take out the bylaw entirely. My idea, instead of attachments are banned, it's forced and arranged. So when they refuse to help him save her, it feels like he's abandoned by them and are simply using him so they can get his super genes. Plus, if we take it out, it allows for 2 love interests. As my dad describes them, one to be the MJ type, a pure, soft-spoken wife character, and then it like a black cat type who isn't evil but tempts him towards the dark side, which I thought was a really cool idea. Yes, the fear of your wife and or unborn child dying is a very reasonable fear, one most married men have felt. However, I cannot even think of one instance where this paranoia leads him to murder another man's kids, let alone many. Of course, we should keep his paranoia, it keeps him human until, of course, he isn't, but there should be some additional pressure to join the dark side. If this isn't making sense, I'm sorry. If enough people bully me into it, I'll make another video detailing the complete timeline. But to me, this not only fixes the age problem, but splitting Padme into 2 distinct personalities could prevent further inconsistencies. And removing the chastity bylaw makes more sense for his real life, as well as Anakin's turn to the dark side. And speaking of Anakin, maybe this is a little nitpicky, but we never actually see why he's so special. Was he a master of pod racing? Yes. Did he build 3PO at like 9 years old? Yes. But look at movie 2 and 3. Name one thing he does that Yoda or Mace Windu couldn't. Maybe the Clone Wars has him be special, but take the movies at face value and he's really not anything special. Maybe we have him show some prodigy level talent and some early training montages, spend a bit of 2 showing off exactly what he's capable of. They do this really well with Rey, actually. They make her really good at anything for very vaguely explained reasons. Only, she's supposed to be nothing special. She's supposed to come from nowhere and nobody. If we kind of just switch Annie and Rey's skills, it would be perfect. Also, we could finally get Jar Jar right. The story was cut very short due to the backlash, but Lucas says he's his favorite character and the key to everything. If you know anything about George Lucas, he's great idea, bad execution.
He refuses to fight. He'd rather die first, and then something turns him around and makes him fight. And I'd never really come up with a satisfactory answer to that. What he could possibly say that would set Luke off. In the process of evolving, the importance of Leia as the sister became obvious. Turning her to the dark side would be the thing that would set Luke off again.
If we could figure him out and get it right, then we could expand on what he could have been and what he was intended to be. Personally, I think he'd be the perfect inverse of Anakin. He's maybe the most trusting and forgiving of the main characters of Phantom Menace. He's good-hearted and naive, the exact opposite of Anakin. But like Anakin, he is deceived by Palpatine, causing the fall of the Republic and the Jedi Order. Maybe if we make him the inverse of Anakin while they're both manipulated by Palpatine, it could show just how powerful he is. Even if we cut him out entirely, he's still better than making him a supporting character in one and then completely abandoning him. Speaking of Palpatine, one of the most infamous controversial bits of the sequels is that somehow Palpatine returned. Which honestly, at face value, I quite like the idea. The Jedi Order is clearly a religious group, and as such, you have to have the devil, the dark side. I like Palpatine that way, and I really don't mind his return in 9. However, it still feels shoehorned and very out of nowhere. My problem isn't that Palpatine returned, it's the somehow with no real rhyme or reason. Maybe hint at it during 7 and 8. This evil spirit is corrupting our characters, like Kylo Ren and maybe Snoke. Before 7, we can tweak Anakin's prophecy and story a little bit so that it's clearly he didn't get rid of him forever in 6, and we can really get that message across. He is the devil, corruption, the eternal temptation of power that is never going to go away no matter how many times you throw it off a bridge. Anakin's role becomes more nuanced. The temptation of the devil, sin, the dark side, whatever you believe Palpatine represents will never go away, so Anakin's role of bringing balance is less permanent. It's not one act to get rid of him forever. That can't happen. But because he did what he did, everyone after him, like Rey, who was tempted by the dark side, can make the right choice. And the final clash between Palpatine and Rey isn't a clash of strength, it's her refusing to become what he wants her to be, taking the opportunity that Anakin sacrificed himself for. That he's still going to come back after this, but we can still choose to fight. If we clarify that Palpatine's coming back and why, it can get the entire message across much clearer and much more powerful. Another 9 problem. What the heck is a dyad? It's a really cool idea, I think. It was introduced in like the last 20 minutes of the last one with 2 barely related characters. I think we could expand on this idea. For example, why not Luke and Leia? They're the 2 children of the literal chosen one. It would make a lot more sense for them to be the dyad in my mind. And we could actually get a definition if we introduce it earlier. What is a dyad? What does it mean? What can they do? Etc. So when Rey and Kylo come around, the audience already knows what that is and what that means. Also, on the topic of Luke and Leia, the kiss in 5? Burn it like their father. Absolute no-brainer. That's a mistake that when cleaned up could drastically improve the film. Which leads me to my third big overarching point. Explain things better. What is a dyad? But also, what exactly are midichlorians? What do they do? How does one construct a lightsaber? Why does Luke's saber call to Rey? How exactly is Palps related to Rey? To Annie? Does Rey take the Skywalker name for Luke and Leia, or does she just have a huge crush on Ben? How does Palpatine return? What is Snoke? What was General Hux up to the whole time? Why didn't Chewie get a medal? What is R2's actual power level? How was Annie conceived? How come he didn't know about Force healing sooner? What's up with General Grievous? Dooku? What's the timeline of events? What year is it? What was Finn gonna tell Rey? Where did Luke's green lightsaber go? How does Leia remember her mother's face? What's up with Annie and Obi-Wan's lightsaber duel in 4? If Padme ain't black hair and Annie brunette, why Luke blonde? On a scale of Rey to 3PO, how gay is everybody? And how the Force does Annie burn to death and make it out with 2 sets of perfect eyelashes that are better than mine? Do we know the answers to these questions? Well, some of them. I have a couple theories about the hair color thing anyway. But taking the movies at face value doesn't offer much of an explanation to some fairly critical questions that I have. My mom also had a thing about Leia. She is in fact the daughter of the Chosen One and seemingly the most powerful Force user ever. Why wouldn't she be able to manipulate the Force? Maybe not like Luke, she doesn't seem like the lightsaber duel type, but maybe like the tricky, these are not the droids you're looking for type. She's already an empath, a manipulator, a diplomat, and she senses emotional shifts better than most Jedi. Leia's a political Force user, would make so much sense for her character and make everything about her so much more compelling. Give her Force empathy, sensing truth, deception, and pain. Already who she is, just as a superpower. Forced communication, feeling Luke's distress across space and 5, boom, canon, expand that. Or maybe the other half of the dyad, a unique philosophy. Something like he starts fights, I end them. Or he fights with a saber, I fight with diplomacy. She seems a bit force sensitive as she tells Luke that she always knew that he was her brother without ever being told that knowledge, but that raises a few issues. Aside from the aforementioned kiss, she somehow recognized Luke as her brother but not Darth Vader as her father when they were in the same room, and then anytime we see her using the Force outside of this line, feels a bit shoehorned in to cover up these fairly blatant mistakes. A reboot could clarify her powers and make them make sense. And same goes for Finn. Finn's a natural Force user with very undefined powers, used as comic relief, and overall just got done dirty. He's a fantastic character. The Rome stormtrooper who ran away for it all to become a Jedi is an amazing plotline. But once again, he's squandered as comic relief. Let him have his arc. Maybe if he ran away to stop fighting, we let him free other stormtroopers with empathy rather than violence. Literal liberation through connection. Maybe he learns through Leia and her kind of Force powers. Maybe becomes your trilogy's Force of Conscious, the one who always speaks for people caught between the two sides. What if he became the hero? Not to overshadow Rey, she's still the main character. What if she became tempted by Palpatine, Kylo, the dark side? We saw what she could become, but then Finn helps her to the other side, reminds her who she is, and then she can become the hero she is and is meant to be. Maybe reflects Luke and Leia's relationship with each other as a Force, as Rey's the main character, but her heroism couldn't have been possible without Finn. And if we do that, the divide of what the Force means to each character, let's expand on it. Make it a philosophical divide. We've established that Luke and Leia see it differently and use it for different reasons and purposes. And clearly, even some Jedi disagree on what this means. Where Mace Windu is very rigid, prioritizing the Jedi's rules over what's good, Qui-Gon Jinn is more adaptive and willing to break Jedi code as he sees it. The prequels heavily imply the flaws with the Jedi, expand on it. Maybe rather than just being too rigid or arrogant, the Jedi could have slowly lost their connection to the Force's true nature. Like they're on the right side, but still wrong? That's the entire point of 8. Maybe in the end, a new Jedi Order could honor the best parts of both, making the sequel trilogy about rebuilding faith, not just institutions. It could build towards a balanced Jedi philosophy at the end of the saga, make it clear that the Force doesn't belong to the Jedi, it chooses who it needs. Whether it's Rey, Finn, Kylo, Leia, Luke, Obi-Wan, even and especially Anakin. Much like the You Can Wear the Mask finale of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the finale can be You Can Have the Force too. Of course, I doubt it'll be as satisfying as Spider-Verse, nearly nothing is, but it could work really well. It could make the finale say something. There is no one right way as long as you're being good. That way, each trilogy can mean something important. The prequels could be about grief, power, and collapse, about what happens when everything is in black and white, you make the wrong choices, and everything you care about disintegrates in your arms. Sometimes literally. The originals would be about hope, temptation, and redemption. You can always refuse to give in to temptation. Now, even after you make the wrong choices, it's not too late to go back. Sequels could be about identity, legacy, and reclamation. How to honor those from the past without bringing back the worst parts. How to find your place in history, and continue the best parts of what came before you. This way, everything, when put together, could easily make the best reboot story in history. These changes are not to fix Star Wars. Well, maybe besides the kiss in 5. That was a mistake, but the rest of these changes aren't. They're designed to better articulate what the meaning was supposed to be. To remove plot holes, better execute storylines, and to make them mean something. To make every moment, character, and arc something different and something special. Make it become what it was always meant to be. With the right people behind the project, it's very possible. I did write out an entire fan casting segment, but if I have to write out one more subtitle by hand, I am going to lose it. So with that said, these are just my thoughts. What about yours? Should there be a Skywalker Saga reboot? Did it make any good points about what could be changed? Do you have any good ideas about what could be changed? Let me know. And as always,
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.